You moved your hand. I saw you move your hand. Claire Bennett's voice shook as she stared at the man she had married just 6 hours ago, Nathan Calloway, the paralyzed heir to Chicago's deadliest mafia family. Slowly, Nathan lifted his eyes from the wheelchair, and the smile that crept across his face was not the smile of a broken man. "Congratulations, Mrs. Calloway," he whispered. "You just discovered a secret that has gotten 3 people killed in this house, and now God help you, you know it too. Before we go one step further, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. It truly means the world to me. Stay with Claire's story all the way to the end, and down in the comments, tell me the city you're watching from tonight so I can see just how far this story has traveled across the world. $400,000 by Friday, or your brother comes off life support." The hospital administrator said it without looking up, without flinching, without a single crack in her professional voice. She was reading from a clipboard the way a butcher reads a receipt. Claire Bennett felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. "I'm sorry, what, your mom?" "Miss Bennett, please, you've seen the statements. Your father's debts were rolled into his estate, and his estate is your brother. The insurance company has formally denied coverage. Without payment, we cannot continue the treatment." "He's 12 years old." "I understand. He's 12 years old and he has leukemia." "I understand, Miss Bennett." "Then how can you stand there and tell me?" "Because it's my job." The administrator finally looked up, and her eyes were not cruel. They were just tired. "I don't make these rules, I just have to speak them out loud." Claire gripped the edge of the desk. Her knuckles went white. Somewhere down the hallway, a monitor was beeping steady and slow, and she knew without having to check that it was the machine keeping Thomas alive. "There has to be something," she whispered. "A payment plan, a charity, anything." "There isn't. Please." The woman slid a single business card across the desk. "This came by courier an hour ago, addressed to you personally. I don't know who sent it. I don't know what it means. But I was told to give it to you if you came in today." Claire picked up the card. One side was blank. The other side had a single address printed in black ink, and beneath it, 3 handwritten words. "Be there, 4 p.m., no name, no phone number, nothing." "Who brought this?" Claire asked. "A man in a black suit," the administrator said. "He didn't give a name. But I'll tell you this, Miss Bennett, and then I'll pretend I never said it." She lowered her voice. "If a man in a black suit brings you a card with no name on it in this city, you either go to that meeting or you disappear. Those are the only 2 things that happen." Claire stared at the card. Her brother's machine beeped in the hallway. She put the card in her coat pocket. The address was a mansion on the Gold Coast. Claire had walked past houses like this her entire life. She had never once imagined walking into one. The wrought iron gate swung open before she even reached the intercom, as though someone inside had been watching her approach. A man in a black suit, possibly the same man who had delivered the card, possibly not. She couldn't tell, they all looked the same, opened the front door without speaking, and gestured her down a long marble hallway toward a set of double oak doors at the far end. He stopped at the doors. He did not open them. "He's waiting for you." "Oh." "Who?" The man said nothing. Claire pushed open the doors, and there in the middle of a study that smelled of cedar and old money sat a man in a wheelchair. He was young. That was the first shock. She had expected someone older, someone gray, someone sickly. Instead, she saw a dark-haired man in his early 30s, sharply dressed in a charcoal suit with a blanket folded neatly across his knees and a pair of steel gray eyes that locked onto hers the instant she walked through the door. "Miss Bennett," his voice was low and unhurried. "Close the door, please. Sit down." Claire closed the door. She did not sit down. "Who are you?" "My name is Nathan Calloway." The air left her lungs all at once. Calloway. Everyone in Chicago knew that name. Her father had whispered it like a curse. Her uncle had spit it on the sidewalk. The newspapers wrote around it, never through it. Judges feared it. Senators answered it. The Calloways did not exist in daylight, and when they did exist, it was only in the shadow that fell across whatever they touched. And she was alone in a room with one of them. "I didn't know," Claire stammered. "I didn't know it was, I'll leave. I'm sorry, I'll just..." "Sit down, Miss Bennett. I really should. Your brother has until Friday." The words stopped her at the door. She turned slowly. Nathan Calloway was still watching her with those calm, colorless eyes, not smiling, not frowning, just watching, like a man who already knew exactly how this conversation was going to end and was simply waiting for her to catch up. "How do you know about my brother?" Claire whispered. "I know about everyone who owes money to Tony Marchetti. I know because Tony Marchetti owes money to me. And I know that your father, before he was killed last spring, left behind debts that Tony is very, very eager to recover." Nathan gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit, please. I have an offer for you, and I will only make it once." Claire sat, her hands were shaking in her lap. Nathan reached across the desk and slid a stack of papers toward her. Thick, bound, official. "This is a marriage contract," he said, "between you and me." "What?" "If you sign it, your brother's treatment will be paid for in full. His future treatments will also be paid for. His medical care will not be interrupted for one single hour." "What?" "In exchange, you will become my wife on paper. You will live in this house. You will be photographed at my side. You will perform the role of a devoted spouse for a period of no less than 2 years." "What?" "Miss Bennett, I can hear you. You don't need to repeat the word." Claire's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. Nathan waited. "Why me?" She finally managed. "Because you have no family, no money, no power, no one who will come asking questions. You are, to put it plainly, the least dangerous woman I could have picked." That's insulting. That's the point." Claire looked down at the contract. The paper blurred in front of her eyes. She was 26 years old. She worked double shifts at a restaurant on Wells Street, and the only man she had ever loved was a 12-year-old boy with a bald head and a bad prognosis, and the choice in front of her was not a choice at all. It was a door, and she was already halfway through it. "If I sign this," she said slowly, "what happens to me?" Nathan's eyes narrowed very slightly. "You live."
Come on, man.
The pen was heavy in her hand. She signed page 1 and her heart pounded in her ears. She signed page 7 and she thought of Thomas's small fingers in hers that morning. She signed page 14 and her throat burned. She signed the final page and Nathan took the papers from her and his hand brushed her wrist. And that was the moment everything changed, because his grip was strong. Not the weak, atrophied grip of a man who had been paralyzed from the waist down for 8 months. Not the careful, trembling grip of a patient. It was the firm, deliberate grip of a man who could have broken her wrist with a single squeeze. Claire's eyes shot up. Nathan's eyes were already on hers. "Is something wrong, Miss Bennett?" "No," she whispered. "Nothing." "Good." And then just for a second, half a second, she saw it. His foot, under the blanket, moving. Just the slightest adjustment. The kind of thing a person does without thinking, shifting their weight in a chair. The kind of thing a paralyzed man could not do, would not do, could never do. And Nathan knew she had seen it. He did not flinch. He did not cover it up. He simply watched her face and waited, and something in the corner of his mouth curled upward the tiniest fraction of an inch, as though he had been waiting to see what she would do, as though this moment, this test was the real reason she was sitting in his study in the first place. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Calloway," Nathan said softly. Claire could not breathe. By nightfall, she was installed in the east wing of the mansion. Her suitcases were carried up a marble staircase by a man who did not speak. Her bedroom was bigger than her entire childhood apartment. The closet was full of clothes in her exact size, tags still attached. Someone had been planning this for weeks. Claire sat on the edge of the enormous 4-poster bed and pressed both hands to her mouth and tried very hard not to scream. A soft knock came at the door. "Come in." An elderly woman stepped inside with a silver tea tray, small, gray-haired, 70 at least. "Good evening, Mrs. Calloway. My name is Margaret. I've served this family for 43 years. "Thank you," Claire said automatically. "That's thank you." Margaret set the tray down. She did not turn to leave. Instead, she moved toward the window, and her voice when it came was so low that Claire almost didn't hear it. "Child, listen to me." Claire's head snapped up. "Do not trust anyone in this house," Margaret whispered. "Do not eat anything I have not prepared with my own hands. Do not speak of your brother where the walls can hear you." The old woman's eyes were sharp and wild. "And whatever happens, whatever he says, whatever you see," she glanced toward the door, Do not ever in front of another living soul pretend that you believe he is paralyzed. Claire's blood ran cold. What are you? Drink your tea, Mrs. Calloway. Margaret's voice rose back to normal. Mr. Calloway requests your presence in the library at 9 o'clock for introductions to the family. Please be prompt. And then she was gone. Claire stared at the closed door. Her hands were shaking so hard the teacup rattled against its saucer. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck 9. Claire stood outside the library with her hand pressed flat against the oak door. Her pulse was loud in her ears. Her mind was screaming at her to run, and there was nowhere to run, and she knew it. Do not ever pretend that you believe he is paralyzed. What in God's name did that mean? She pushed the door open. The library was vast and shadowy, lit only by a fire in a marble hearth. Nathan sat in his wheelchair by the flames, the blanket arranged across his legs with surgical care. Beside him stood a tall man with a mustache, his Uncle Richard, she guessed. And in a high-backed chair in the center of the room, seated like a queen on a throne, was a woman in her late 70s with hair as white as bone and eyes the color of cold river stones. Ah, the old woman said. The little wife. The voice was warm, cultured, beautiful. It was the voice of a grandmother reading a bedtime story, and Claire knew instantly that it was the most dangerous voice she had ever heard in her life. Mrs. Calloway, Claire said, it's an honor. Come closer, dear. Claire came closer. Victoria Calloway studied her the way a jeweler studies a stone. Slow, unhurried, absolute. Pretty, Victoria said finally. A bit thin, a bit pale, but pretty. She turned to Nathan. Did you pick her, dear, or did a lawyer? I picked her. How lovely. Victoria turned back to Claire. Sit down, child. Richard, pour the girl some wine. And for heaven's sake, close that door. The draft in this house is murderous. Claire sat. Now, Victoria folded her papery hands in her lap. I'd like you to tell me, Mrs. Calloway, why you married my grandson. He asked me, and please don't lie to me, dear. The words hit Claire like a slap. I know who you are. Victoria smiled gently. The smile did not reach her eyes. Claire Marie Bennett, 26, waitress. Brother dying of leukemia at Northwestern. Father killed 6 months ago in a hit and run that between us was no hit and run at all. Gambling debts of $400,000 to a man named Tony Marchetti. Victoria's voice remained sweet. You married my grandson because you needed money. Say it. Claire's throat closed. Say it, child. Yes, Claire whispered. Good. Victoria nodded. In this house, we do not lie to each other. We lie only to the world. Do you understand? Yes. Repeat it. We lie only to the world. Beautiful. Victoria lifted her wine. Now, my dear, I am going to tell you something very important, and I'd like you to listen very carefully. The fire popped in the hearth. My grandson is the last of the Calloway bloodline. His father, my son, died 12 years ago. His mother has been locked away in a hospital for nearly as long. 8 months ago on the Kennedy Expressway, an unknown assassin ran Nathan's car into a concrete divider at 80 miles an hour. He survived, but he will never walk again. Victoria leaned forward. Do you understand, dear? Claire's eyes flicked for the smallest, faintest fraction of a second toward Nathan. He was watching her, and in that instant she understood. This was the test, right here, right now. Every word Victoria had spoken, every pause, every smile, it had all been leading to this single moment. If Claire's face betrayed even a flicker of doubt about Nathan's paralysis, Victoria would see it. Victoria would know something was wrong, and whatever game Nathan was playing, whatever war he was secretly fighting in this house would collapse. And Claire would collapse with it. I understand, ma'am, Claire said quietly. Her voice did not shake. I cannot imagine what your family has been through, and I promise you I will take care of him. A silence. A long, long silence. Then Victoria smiled. What a lovely young woman, the old woman said. What a very, very lovely young woman. And Claire knew without a shadow of a doubt that Victoria Calloway did not believe one single word she had just said. It was past 11 when Claire returned to her room. She closed the door, locked it, leaned her back against it, and for the first time since she had signed the contract, she allowed her body to shake. She did not cry. She did not pray. She sat on the floor and pressed her forehead against her knees and listened to the silence of the house, and she understood with a cold, sharp clarity that she had walked into something far worse than she had imagined. Someone tried to murder Nathan Calloway. He survived. He is pretending to be paralyzed. And whoever tried to kill him is still in this house. Claire lifted her head slowly. Across the room on the nightstand beside the untouched tea, a folded piece of paper had appeared. It had not been there when she left for the library. She crossed the room on legs that barely held her. She unfolded the note. 6 words. Hard, clean, mail. Tomorrow morning, my study, alone. N. Claire stared at the note for a long, long time. Then, with hands that had finally stopped shaking, she walked to the candle on the nightstand, held the paper to the flame, and watched it burn. Outside her window, Chicago lay under a cold, thin rain. Somewhere in that city, her little brother was sleeping in a hospital bed alive. Would it be because she had sold herself to a man who was not what he pretended to be, in a house where the walls listened, in a family where an old woman sipped wine and calculated which granddaughter-in-law would die first? Claire pressed her forehead against the cold glass of the window, and in the silence of that ivory room, she made her first promise as a Calloway wife. I will not break, she whispered. I will not crack. I will not be buried in the basement of this house. The ash of Nathan's note drifted off the candle and settled on the floor. I will learn this house. I will learn this family. I will learn this man I just married. She closed her eyes. And when the time comes, God help me, I will walk out of here with my brother. Alive. Both of us, I swear it. Down the hallway, a clock struck midnight. And in a study at the other end of the mansion, a man who was supposed to be paralyzed stood up out of his wheelchair, walked slowly to the window and looked out at the same cold rain. His new wife was watching. He smiled. Then he picked up a pistol from his desk, checked the magazine, and slid it back into the holster hidden beneath his suit jacket. The war at last could begin. Claire did not sleep that night. She lay on top of the covers in her clothes, her shoes still on, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, listening to the house. And the house, she was beginning to understand, was never truly silent. There were footsteps in the hallway at 2 a.m, a door opening somewhere below her at 3, the soft, careful click of a lock turning at 4. Someone somewhere was moving through the mansion in the dark, and Claire lay very still and wondered if they were coming for her. At 6, she got up. At 7, Margaret brought her breakfast on a silver tray. Did you sleep, child? No. Good. Claire looked up sharply. Good boy. A woman who sleeps in this house is a woman who forgets where she is. Margaret set the tray down. Eat. You'll need your strength. He'll be expecting you at 9. Margaret. Eat, child. Margaret, last night, what you told me. The old woman froze, her hand tightened around the edge of the tray, and when she spoke, it was in the same low, careful whisper as the night before. I did not say anything to you last night, Mrs. Calloway. Do you understand me? But you. I did not say anything, and you did not hear anything. And if anyone in this house asks you what I said, the answer is that I brought you tea, and I wished you good night. Is that clear? Claire stared at her. Is that clear, Mrs. Calloway? Yes. Good girl. Margaret straightened. Her voice returned to normal. I've laid out a blue dress for you. Mr. Calloway prefers blue dew in the mornings. I'll return at 8:45 to escort you to the study. She left. Claire looked down at the tray. Eggs, toast, coffee, a glass of orange juice. And beneath the napkin, folded so small, it was almost invisible, a second piece of paper. She unfolded it with trembling fingers. 4 words this time. Trust no one. Even him. Claire sat very still for a long moment. Then she folded the paper, tore it into pieces, and dropped the pieces into her coffee where the ink bled out and disappeared. She drank the coffee anyway. At 9 o'clock exactly, she knocked on the door of Nathan Calloway's study. Come in. She pushed open the door. He was at his desk, in the wheelchair, blanket across his knees. Exactly as he had been yesterday. Exactly as he had been last night. And Claire stood in the doorway and stared at him, and he stared back, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. Close the door, please, Nathan said. She closed it. Sit. She sat. Lock the door. Claire hesitated. Lock the door, Miss Bennett. It's Mrs. Calloway now. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe? Or amusement? She couldn't tell. Mrs. Calloway, he said softly. Lock the door. She stood up, crossed to the door, turned the heavy brass lock, and came back to her chair. She sat down. She folded her hands in her lap. She waited. Nathan Calloway studied her. You didn't sleep. No. You saw something yesterday. I saw several things yesterday. You saw one thing in particular. Claire's pulse pounded in her throat. She did not answer. My grandmother, she tested you last night, Nathan said. You passed. That was very good. You saved both our lives. I don't understand what's happening in this house. No, you don't. Then tell me. He looked at her for a long, long moment, and then without taking his eyes from hers, Nathan Calloway placed both hands on the arms of the wheelchair and stood up. He stood up slowly like a man who had been crouched over a rifle too long. His shoulders rolled back, his spine straightened. He stepped away from the chair 1 step, 2 steps, 3, and stood in front of her with the blanket crumpled on the floor at his feet and his steel gray eyes locked onto her face. Claire could not breathe. She had known, but knowing and seeing were not the same thing, and seeing a man rise up out of a wheelchair like a ghost climbing out of a grave was not a thing her mind was prepared to process. Sit down, she whispered. Miss Bennett. Sit down, please, sit down, get back in the chair, someone will see you. The door is locked. Sit down. Nathan sat, not back in the wheelchair, in the chair across from her at the desk. He crossed one leg over the other, easy and fluid, and watched her the way a man watches a cornered animal to see which way it will run. Mrs. Calloway, he said quietly, I am going to tell you the truth now. I am going to tell it to you once, and I am going to tell it to you clearly, and when I am finished, you are going to have to decide whether you can live with it. I already signed the contract. This is a different decision. Claire pressed her hands together in her lap to keep them from shaking. Tell me, she said. Nathan leaned forward. His voice dropped to something quieter than a whisper. 8 months ago, my car did not hit a concrete divider by accident. The brake lines were cut. The airbags were disabled. The driver's side door was jammed shut from the outside. Whoever built that car wanted me dead, Mrs. Calloway. They wanted me dead very, very badly. Who? Someone in this house. Claire's stomach turned. I spent 3 weeks in a coma, 4 months in a private wing of Northwestern, where I was guarded around the clock by men I personally pay and personally trust, none of whom are Calloways. During those 4 months, I recovered. Slowly, painfully, completely. I can walk, I can run, I can shoot. I can do everything I could do before the accident. But if I had come home walking Mrs. Calloway, I would have been dead within a week, because whoever tried to kill me is still in this house, and the moment they realize I survived intact, they will try again. And the next time they will succeed. Claire stared at him. So you're pretending. I am pretending. You're pretending to be paralyzed so the person who tried to kill you will think you're no longer a threat. Correct. And they'll get comfortable. They'll stop watching you. They'll make a mistake. Exactly. And when they make that mistake, I'll find them. Nathan's voice was very calm. And I'll handle them. Handle them. Claire did not have to ask what that word meant. Not in this house, not from this man, not from the grandson of Victoria Calloway. She swallowed hard. How long have you been pretending? 6 months. 6 months. 6 months in that wheelchair. 6 months letting my grandmother cut my meat for me at dinner. 6 months of my Uncle Richard smiling at me across a table while he calculates how much longer I have to live before the empire falls into his hands. 6 months of reading faces, watching hands, listening to voices, waiting for one person to slip. And every month that has gone by, I have gotten closer, but I've also gotten weaker. Weaker. I can't do it alone anymore, Miss Bennett. That's why you're here. Claire went very still. I don't understand. You understand perfectly. You're just not ready to say it out loud yet. I'm a waitress. You're a woman with nothing left to lose, a dying brother, and a face no one in this family has ever seen before. You walk into rooms I can't walk into. You hear conversations I can't hear. You can stand 3 feet from a cousin of mine and watch their hands shake when my name is mentioned, and they will never ever suspect that you are watching for me. You married me to spy on your family. I married you to keep you alive. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. Claire stood up, She could not sit any longer. She paced to the window, to the fireplace, back to the desk. Her hands were pressed against her mouth. Her mind was spinning. "You used my brother," she whispered. "Yes. You used a dying 12-year-old boy to force a stranger to sign a contract you knew was a death sentence." "Yes." "How could you?" "Miss Bennett," Nathan's voice was steady. "If I had not married you, your brother would be dead by Friday. Tony Marchetti was never going to let that debt go. Your father didn't die in a hit and run. He was killed by Marchetti's men, and Thomas was going to be next. I didn't use your brother. I bought him. I bought both of you. And in exchange, I'm asking you to help me stay alive long enough to tear this family apart from the inside out." Claire turned slowly. "And if I say no?" "You can't say no." "I can. Mrs. Calloway, you signed the papers. You're a Calloway now. If you leave this house, Victoria will know within the hour that something is wrong. She will send men. They will find you. They will find your brother. And everything I just told you, everything about the wheelchair, about the accident, about the 6 months of pretending, will die with you in a ditch somewhere off the interstate. You're threatening me. I'm warning you. There's a difference." Claire sank down into the chair again. Her legs would not hold her. Nathan waited. "Why?" she finally said. "Why tell me all of this? You could have kept me in the dark. You could have used me without me ever knowing. Why take the risk? Because a woman who doesn't know she's in danger cannot help me survive it." Claire looked up at him. His face was very tired. Up close in the morning light, she could see things she hadn't noticed yesterday. The faint scar that ran along his jawline, the dark circles under his eyes, the careful way he held his left shoulder as though something inside it had never quite healed right. She realized, a man who was one mistake away from dying. And he had just put his life in her hands. "Who did it?" Claire asked softly. Who tried to kill you?" Nathan was silent for a long moment. "My top 3 suspects are my Uncle Richard, my cousin Sebastian, and my grandmother." "Your grandmother?" "Yes. She's your grandmother. In this family, Mrs. Calloway, that is not the protection you seem to think it is." Claire pressed her fingers into her eyes. "Why would she want you dead? You're the heir. You're the one who carries the name." "Because I don't want what she wants." "What does she want?" Nathan's jaw tightened. "War," he said quietly. "She wants war. The kind of war this family hasn't seen in 40 years. She wants to move against the Marchettis, against the O'Sullivans, against 3 other families who have been at peace with us since before I was born. She wants to take the city back to the way it was in the 70s, when the Calloways ruled by blood and by fire, and children in my position did not grow up to have opinions about it. And I want to take this family legitimate." Claire blinked. "Legitimate? Construction, shipping, casinos, real estate? We already have more money than any of us can spend. I want to pull this family out of the blood business and into the daylight. I want my children, if I ever live long enough to have them, to grow up with a last name that doesn't get them followed through the grocery store by the FBI." Nathan's voice was flat. "My grandmother calls it weakness. My uncle calls it betrayal. And one of them 8 months ago decided it was a firing offense. So this isn't about money. It's never about money, Mrs. Calloway. In families like mine, it is always, always about who gets to decide what the family is." Claire let that sink in. And then a thought occurred to her. A small, cold thought that dropped into her mind like a pebble into a well. "Nathan." "Yes." "Your grandmother last night. She told me I had to tell the truth in this house. She made me say out loud why I married you." "Yes, I heard." "You heard?" The library has 3 listening devices, Mrs. Calloway. 2 of them are mine. One of them I suspect is Victoria's. I heard every word." Claire's stomach flipped. "Then you know she doesn't trust me." "She doesn't trust anyone. Don't take it personally." "No, listen to me." Claire leaned forward. "She tested me. She tested me to see if I knew about the wheelchair. She didn't phrase it as a test, but that's what it was. She wanted to see if my face gave anything away when she told me you'd never walk again." Nathan went very still. "Explain that." "She was watching my eyes, Nathan. When she said the words, 'he will never walk again,' she was watching my eyes, not yours. She wasn't testing you. She was testing whether I already knew." The silence in the study was absolute. "Nathan." I heard you. Nathan, if she was testing whether I knew, then she has suspicions. Yes, she has suspicions that I am not in fact paralyzed. Yes, Nathan's face went white. He reached across the desk very slowly and pressed his palm flat against the polished wood. He stared at his own hand, and for the first time since Claire had met him, she saw something that looked very much like fear. That changes everything, he said. Does it? If she suspects she's not waiting anymore, she's moving. Nathan looked up at her. She brought you here last night to see your face. She asked you those questions to see your eyes. She was measuring you. And if she decided in that moment that you knew, then what? Then she's already given the order. What order? Nathan did not answer. Claire stood up. What order, Nathan? An order that would have gone out last night probably by 11:30. His voice was calm but tight. To someone in this house, someone she trusts, someone who has done this before. Done what before? Arranged accidents. He met her eyes. Car crashes, overdoses, falls down staircases, intruders in the night, grieving widows found face down in the bathtub. Claire felt the blood drain from her face. She absolutely would. She already tried to kill me once, Miss Bennett. Why would she hesitate to kill the woman she thinks I've told the truth to? But I didn't. It doesn't matter what you did. It matters what she thinks you did. Claire put a hand on the back of the chair to steady herself. How long? What? How long before? I don't know. A day, 2 days, a week if she's being cautious. Nathan, I know. Nathan, my brother, is in a hospital bed across this city. If they come for me, they won't touch him. That was written into the contract. It's enforceable. By who? By your grandmother. Nathan was silent. Claire laughed. It was a terrible shaking sound. She pressed both hands to her mouth and turned away from him and stood in front of the window, staring down at the iron gate at the end of the drive. I've been married to you for less than a day. I know. And I'm already going to do. No, you're not. Nathan, look at me, Claire, look at me. She turned. It was the first time he had used her first name. He had stood up again. He was crossing the room toward her. He moved like a soldier, she realized, like a man who had been trained to move without making noise. He stopped directly in front of her. He was taller than she'd expected. You are not going to date he said. You don't know that. I know that because I have been one move ahead of this woman for 6 months, and I am going to be one move ahead of her again. Do you hear me, Nathan? Do you hear me? Yes. I need you to do exactly what I tell you today. No questions, no hesitation. Can you do that, Claire? Yes, I can do that. He studied her for a moment longer. Then he stepped back, turned and walked to a panel behind his desk. He pressed something Claire couldn't see, and a small section of the bookshelf swung open. He reached inside and took out a small, black object and crossed back to her and pressed it into her palm. It was a cell phone, older, heavy. This phone has one number in it, Nathan said. If anything happens in this house that you cannot handle, if anyone comes to your room, if anyone raises a hand to you, if you so much as smell trouble, you press the one button and you hold it. Do you understand who answers? A man named Daniel. He used to be my driver. Now he is the only human being on this earth I would trust with my own mother's life. Okay. Second, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is the name of the hospital your brother will be transferred to at 3 o'clock this afternoon. It is a private facility off the books. He will be registered under a false name. He will be guarded by 2 of my men. Nobody in this house will know where he is. Not my uncle, not my cousin, not Victoria. Nathan. Third, he held out a small silver object, a key. This key opens a door you haven't found yet in this house. When you find it and you will go through it, lock it behind you. Wait for me. Do you understand? Where is the door? You'll know it when you see it. Nathan, that's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you right now. The fewer details you have, the safer you are. Claire closed her fingers around the phone, the paper, the key. Is there a fourth? Nathan looked at her. Yes, he said. What? Don't fall in love with me, Mrs. Calloway. Claire blinked. Excuse me, I'm a dead man walking. I have been for 8 months. And whatever happens in this house in the next days and weeks, I need you clear-headed. I need you sharp. I need you able to make the hard call when the time comes. His eyes held hers. Do not let yourself feel anything for me. Do not let yourself start hoping. I am not going to survive this, Miss Bennett. I am only going to take as many of them with me as I can. And I need you to walk out of here when it's over. Do you understand? Claire stared at him. She opened her mouth. She closed it again. And then very quietly she said, "That's a very arrogant thing to assume, Mr. Calloway." For the first time since she had met him, Nathan Calloway laughed. It was a short, startled sound. And then it was gone and his face was stone again and he was turning away from her, crossing back to the wheelchair, lowering himself into it, pulling the blanket across his knees. "Unlock the door," he said. She walked to the door. She turned the lock. "Mrs. Calloway," he said behind her. She paused her hand on the doorknob. "Yes. If my grandmother calls for you today, if she invites you for tea, for a walk, for a private word of any kind, you do not go. Do you understand? Mom, what do I say? You say you have a headache. You say you are resting. You say anything you like. But you do not go into a room alone with that woman until I tell you it's safe. Is that clear?" "Yes." "Good." Claire opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. And as she walked back toward the marble staircase, the phone heavy in her pocket, the key cold against her palm, she thought about her brother and her father and a waitress job on Wells Street, and a little apartment in Lincoln Park where the walls had been thin and the rent had been late, and nobody had ever tried to kill her. 24 hours ago, Claire Bennett had been nobody. Now she was a Calloway. And somewhere in this house, maybe upstairs, maybe down the hall, maybe in the very next room, an old woman with beautiful white hair was deciding whether Claire would live to see Sunday. Claire climbed the stairs to her bedroom, closed the door, locked it, and sat down on the edge of the four-poster bed. She took out the key. She stared at it. And somewhere far away down at the other end of the enormous mansion, a clock struck 10, and the sound traveled through the walls and through the silence and through her chest like a countdown beginning. The clock struck 10, and the knock came at 10:03. 3 soft raps, polite, patient. The kind of knock a grandmother might make at a granddaughter's door on a Sunday morning. Claire froze on the edge of the bed. "Mrs. Calloway." The voice was warm, cultured, beautiful. "Dear, are you awake, Victoria?" Claire's hand tightened around the key in her palm until the metal bit into her skin. Nathan had told her not 10 minutes ago that if Victoria called for her today, she was to refuse, under no circumstances. Not for tea, not for a walk, not for a private word. And here Victoria was, at her door already. "Mrs. Calloway, dear, may I come in?" Claire slipped the phone, the paper, and the key under the mattress. She stood up. She smoothed her dress. She walked to the door and placed her hand on the lock. She did not turn it. "I'm sorry," she called, and her voice came out thin but steady. "I'm not feeling very well this morning. I have a terrible headache. I was about to lie down." A pause. "Oh, my dear." Victoria's voice was full of concern. "How awful. May I bring you anything? A cool cloth? Some aspirin?" "No, ma'am, thank you. I just need to rest." Another pause. Longer this time. "Of course, dear. Of course." The voice held warmth the way a knife holds a handle. "You'll join us for lunch, I hope." I'll try." "Good girl." And then footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps receding down the hall. Claire pressed her forehead against the door. She could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. She stood there for a long minute, and then for 2, and then she forced herself to step back from the door and sit down on the bed before her legs gave out. She had refused Victoria Calloway. Nothing happened for the next hour. No, that was not quite true. Nothing visible happened. But Claire lay on the bed and listened, and the house was not silent. She heard footsteps in the hallway twice. She heard a door open somewhere below her. She heard very faintly a man's voice speaking on a telephone, not words, just the cadence, low and urgent. And once she heard something she could not explain at all. A woman laughing, short, bright, almost girlish. Claire did not know who in this house laughed like that. At 11:15, Margaret came in with fresh towels. The old woman did not speak. She crossed the room, set the towels on the dresser, and began smoothing the edge of the bedspread as though she had come in for nothing more than housekeeping. But as she straightened the fabric, her voice came out in that same whispered breath as before, so low, Claire almost missed it. She's called the doctor. What? Dr. Holloway, the family physician. She's asked him to come this afternoon to examine you. She said you seemed unwell last night. Claire sat up. Margaret, he's not a real doctor, is he? Oh, he's a real doctor, child. That's the problem. Margaret's eyes were very still. He signs death certificates in this family. He has been signing them for 30 years. The blood left Claire's face all at once. What time is he coming? 3 o'clock. Does Nathan know? I don't know, child. That's not something Margaret would be told. She finished smoothing the bedspread. She turned to go. Margaret. The old woman paused at the door. Why are you helping me? Margaret looked back over her shoulder. And for the first time, Claire saw something in the old woman's face that looked like grief. Old grief, the kind that had sat in the corners of a person's mouth for so long that it had carved permanent lines there. Because I had a daughter once, Mrs. Calloway. She was about your age. She married into this family 41 years ago. She was a kind girl, a quiet girl, a girl who wanted very much to be loved. Margaret's hand rested on the doorknob. She fell down the main staircase 6 months after the wedding. Broke her neck. Dr. Holloway signed the certificate. Claire could not speak. I stayed because somebody had to remember her, Margaret said quietly. And because I promised myself that if another girl ever walked into this house the way my daughter did, young and alone and with nothing to protect her, I would not let Victoria Calloway do it twice. She left. The door clicked shut. Claire sat on the bed, and for a long moment, the only sound in the room was her own breath shaking in her chest. Then she slid off the mattress, pulled the phone out from under it, and pressed the one button. It rang once. A man's voice answered. Calm, measured, low. Mrs. Calloway. Is this Daniel? Yes, ma'am. Nathan said if I smelled trouble. What have you smelled? Dr. Holloway is coming at 3 o'clock. Victoria called for him. She said it was to examine me. A pause on the line, very short, but Claire felt it. Stay in your room, Mrs. Calloway. Do not open the door for anyone except myself or Mr. Calloway. Do not drink anything. Do not eat anything. If Dr. Holloway knocks, you do not answer. You do not speak. You do not make a sound. Is that clear? Yes. I'll speak to Mr. Calloway immediately. Stay on the line until I tell you to hang up. She stayed on the line. She heard him moving through a building, footsteps on hardwood, a door opening, and then muffled but unmistakable Nathan's voice. Put her on. The phone changed hands. Claire. Nathan, she's sending a doctor. I heard you're going to be all right. He signs death certificates, Nathan. Margaret just told me, I know what he signs. Listen to me. I need you to do exactly what I'm about to tell you. You're going to pack a small bag, nothing heavy, just one change of clothes and whatever you cannot leave behind. When I hang up this phone, you will have 15 minutes. 15 minutes, Claire. Do you understand? 15 minutes for what? The key I gave you. Go to the east hallway, past the library, past the portrait gallery. At the end of the hallway, there is a servants' corridor. Take it. Walk to the third door on your left. Unlock it. Go inside. Lock it behind you. Do not come out for anyone but me. Do you understand? Yes. 15 minutes, Claire. Yes. He hung up. She did not let herself breathe yet. She moved. She pulled a canvas bag from the closet. She threw in a sweater, a pair of shoes, the folded paper with the name of her brother's hospital, and the photograph of Thomas she had brought from home. She put the phone in her coat pocket. She tied the key into the hem of her sleeve, and then she walked to the door, unlocked it, and stepped into the hallway. The house was silent. She walked past the head of the marble staircase. She walked past the portrait gallery where 4 generations of Calloway men stared down at her with the same hard eyes. She walked past the library. Her heart was a hammer. Every footstep on the runner felt like an explosion. She turned the corner into the east hallway. And there, standing at the far end, was Richard, Nathan's uncle, the tall, thin man with the narrow face and the mustache. He was facing away from her, looking out a window, a cigarette in his hand. Claire froze. He had not seen her, but he was standing exactly between her and the servants' corridor. She pressed her back against the wall. Her lungs would not expand. Her eyes searched the hallway for a door, any door. He turned. Their eyes met. For a long second, neither of them moved. Mrs. Calloway, he said, surprised, then amused. I thought you were unwell. Claire's mouth opened. Her voice came out tight and high. I thought a walk might help. A walk, Richard exhaled smoke. Through the servant's wing. I got lost. Did you? Yes. In a hallway. I don't know the house yet. Richard studied her. He was Claire realized not at all the man he had seemed last night in the library. Last night he had stood silent beside Nathan, a prop, a shadow. Here in daylight alone with her, his eyes were sharp as a razor and twice as cold. He was a man who had been waiting his whole life for his nephew to die, and he was a man who had just spotted something that did not fit. My dear, Richard said softly, may I ask what is in the bag? My medication. All of it. My hands were cold. I put my gloves in. And a book. A book. I thought I might read in the garden. In the servant's wing. I got lost. Yes, you said that. He began walking toward her. Claire did not move. He walked slowly, deliberately, each step a hammer striking her ribs. He stopped 3 feet from her. She could smell his cologne. She could see the tiny pit of an old scar at the corner of his mouth. She could see the ring on his little finger, gold crest, the Calloway crest. Mrs. Calloway, he said very gently, I would like to help you find your way back to your room. I would like to help you very much. Will you let me help you? Claire's throat worked. Yes. Good. He reached out. His hand closed around her upper arm. His grip was tight. He began to walk her back up the hallway. And as they walked, he leaned in just slightly and murmured in her ear so low and so close that his breath moved her hair. Do you know what I do in this family, my dear? Claire could not speak. I am the one who keeps the house in order. When something is not where it should be, I put it back. When someone is not where they should be, his grip tightened just a fraction. I put them back as well. Do you understand me? Yes. Good girl. They reached her bedroom door. He let go of her arm. You will stay in this room, Mrs. Calloway, until Dr. Holloway arrives at 3. You will receive him with the grace becoming of your new name. You will allow him to examine you, and you will not wander the servants' corridors again. Am I making myself clear? Yes. Lovely. He smiled, and there was no warmth in it at all. Welcome to the family. He closed her door. Claire heard a key turn on the other side. He had locked her in. For a long moment, she could not move. She stood in the middle of the ivory room with the bag in her hand and the key in her sleeve, and everything inside her wanted to collapse. Everything wanted to sit down on the floor and shake. She did not collapse. She walked to the door. She pressed her ear against it. She heard Richard's footsteps retreating down the hall. She pulled out the phone. One button. Held. Claire. He locked me in. Who did, Richard? He caught me in the east hallway. He walked me back. He locked the door from the outside. Nathan's voice did not change at all. That was what frightened her most. She had expected him to curse, to shout, to lose his calm. Instead, he got quieter, lower, more precise. Claire, listen to me carefully. Is there a window in your room that opens? Yes. What is below it? I don't know. I think it's the side garden. How high? Second floor. How high above the garden? I don't know. 20 feet at 25 feet. That's too high. Nathan, don't go through the window. A breath on the line. Open your closet. What? Open your closet. All the way. Push the clothes to the side. Look at the back wall. She crossed the room. She opened the closet. She pushed aside the dresses, the blue one, the cream one, the pale rose she had not yet worn, and she stared at the back wall. It was wood paneling, smooth, painted ivory to match the room. It's just a wall, Nathan. Push on the left panel, waist height. She pushed. The wall clicked. A section of paneling swung inward on hidden hinges, and Claire was looking into a narrow, dark passage that smelled of dust and old wood and something metallic she could not name. Oh my God. Every bedroom in that house has one. My grandfather had them built in the 50s, in case the family ever needed to move through the house without being seen. Lots of them have been sealed up. Yours has not. Do you know why? No. Because I unsealed it 2 months ago. I have been preparing for you for 2 months, Claire. She stared into the dark passage. Where does it go? It goes where I told you to go. The third door on the left in the servants' corridor. There is another entrance from inside this passage. It will put you exactly where I need you to be. Nathan, Take the bag, take the phone, leave the door to your room locked from the outside. When they come to check on you, and they will in about 20 minutes, they will find an empty room and no way you could have left it. That will buy us time. How much time? Not much. Go, now. She stepped into the passage. She pulled the paneling closed behind her. The darkness was complete. And then a small light flicked on at her waist, the phone glowing in her hand, and she began to walk. The passage was narrow, cold. The walls were rough wood, and in places she could feel the cold of the outer stone of the house pressing through. She walked slowly. Her shoulder brushed something and dust fell on her hair, and she had to bite the inside of her cheek to keep from making a sound. She walked for what felt like a very long time, and then at a bend in the passage she stopped, because she could hear voices, faint, muffled, coming from somewhere on the other side of the wall to her right. Two voices, a man and a woman, and she knew one of them immediately. The warm, beautiful voice, the grandmother voice, Victoria. Claire pressed herself against the wall. She listened. Too fast, Victoria, too obvious. If Holloway goes in there at 3 and she is found dead at 4, the questions will not be questions we can answer. The man's voice, older, rough. She did not recognize it. She doesn't need to be dead, darling. She needs to be sedated, deeply enough that she cannot speak, long enough that we can take her out of the house. There is a room upstate. The room will do the rest. And Nathan will be told that his wife has had a nervous episode, that she has been taken to a facility for her own safety, that she has not permitted visitors. He will accept this because he has no choice. He will not accept it. He will accept whatever I tell him to accept, darling. He is a cripple in a chair. What is he going to do, wheel himself up to Wisconsin? A short laugh, the man's. Claire's hands were shaking so hard the phone rattled in her palm. And if he insists, then my dear, we revisit the original plan. The one I had to put on the shelf after the accident did not finish him off the way it should have. I have been patient. I have been so very patient. But Nathan has become a stone in my shoe, and a daughter-in-law who asks too many questions is a stone too far. Do this for me, Gregory. Do this one thing, and I will finally have the peace to finish what I started 8 months ago. Claire stopped breathing. 8 months ago. It had been her. Not Richard, not Sebastian. Her. Victoria had ordered Nathan's death 8 months ago. Victoria had cut the brake lines on her own grandson's car. Victoria had sat across from him at Christmas dinner afterward and cut his meat into small pieces and fed him like an invalid, knowing that she had been the one who put him in that chair. Claire's free hand rose to her mouth. A floorboard creaked under her foot. The voices on the other side of the wall stopped. What was that, rats, darling? In the walls. I've told Richard 100 times. It didn't sound like rats. A pause. A very long pause. Gregory, Victoria said softly, be a dear and take a look around. It's probably nothing, but I don't like probably. Claire heard a chair push back. She moved. She moved fast as she dared, feeling along the wall with her fingers for the next turn, the next door, any door. The light of the phone shook in her hand. Her bag banged against her hip. She could hear footsteps now on the other side of the wall. Heavy footsteps, a man's footsteps coming closer. She turned a corner. There. A door. Small, low, a handle. She grabbed it. It did not move. No, please. She yanked again. It opened. She tumbled through it and pulled it shut behind her as quietly as she could, and she found herself crouched in a tiny windowless alcove with one other door in front of her, a plain wooden door with a brass knob. The third door on the left. She fumbled the key out of her sleeve. Her fingers would not work. She dropped the key. She picked it up. She jammed it into the lock. It turned. She pushed the door open and fell inside and locked it behind her. And then she turned around. And she saw what Nathan had been hiding. It was a small room. A command center, really, one wall covered in monitors, each one showing a different feed from somewhere in the house. The library, the dining room, the main staircase, the drive, the front gate, Nathan's study, and her own bedroom. And standing in the middle of her own bedroom right now on the feed was Richard. He had a key in his hand. He was looking at her empty bed. He was looking at her open closet. He was walking toward the closet, and behind her in the command room a voice spoke very quietly from the shadows of the far corner. Hello, Mrs. Calloway. Claire spun around. A man was sitting in a chair against the wall. Mid-40s, broad shoulders, a scar across one eyebrow. He was holding a handgun in his lap. He was not pointing it at her. He was pointing it at the door behind her. "My name is Daniel," the man said. "Mr. Calloway asked me to wait for you. He should be here in about 90 seconds. I'd suggest you sit down. This is the part where things start getting loud." On the monitor, Richard pushed the clothes aside. He found the seam in the paneling. He pressed it. The passage opened, and Richard stepped inside. Claire sat down very slowly, her eyes locked on the screen, her hands clenched in her lap, and she understood with a clarity that felt almost peaceful that somewhere in this house, very soon someone was about to die. She did not yet know who. On the monitor, Richard disappeared into the passage. Claire could not take her eyes off the screen. "He's going to find the command room," she whispered. "He's going to find us." "No, ma'am, he's not. Daniel, he's 10 feet behind me in that wall. He's in the wrong passage." Claire turned. Daniel had not moved. The gun was still resting in his lap, his left hand cradling the grip, his right thumb stroking the safety like a man absently petting a cat. His eyes were on the screen. Mr. Calloway had the passages rerouted 3 weeks ago. The one that used to lead here was sealed off and redirected to a dead end near the wine cellar. When Richard comes out of that passage, he's going to be standing in an empty pantry. He's going to look around. He's going to curse. And he's going to go back the way he came. And he's going to tell his mother that his nephew's wife walked out of a locked room. And for the next 20 minutes, nobody in this house is going to know what in God's name just happened. Claire stared at him. "You rerouted the walls of this house?" "Mr. Calloway did, ma'am. I just held the flashlight." She sank back into the chair. Her hands would not stop shaking. On the monitor, another feed caught her eye, a side hallway empty, and then a shape moving fast through it. A man, sleeves rolled up, a shoulder holster visible as he moved. He was walking toward the servants' corridor, and there was nothing of the wheelchair about him, nothing of the blanket, nothing of the invalid. He moved like a man who had been a soldier once. Nathan. He was coming for her. 60 seconds, Daniel said calmly. "Keep your head." I can't do this." "Yes, you can. They were going to take me upstate. There's a room upstate, Daniel." I heard her say it. She said the room would do the rest. "I know, ma'am." "You know. I've known about that room since I was 19 years old. 6 women have gone into it. None of them ever came out." He finally looked at her. His eyes were tired. "You're not going in it, Mrs. Calloway. Not today, not ever." The door behind Claire rattled. She shot to her feet. "Stay where you are," Daniel said. 3 short knocks, then 2, then 1. Daniel stood across the room, unlocked the door, and Nathan stepped in. He was out of breath. Not from fear, Claire could see that immediately. From speed. He had run here. He closed the door behind him, threw the bolt, turned to her, and in the space of a single heartbeat, his face went through 3 things she was not expecting. Relief? Something softer. And then the mask again hard and closed as he crossed to her and gripped her shoulders. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Did he touch you?" "He grabbed my arm in the hallway, that's all." "Did he bruise you?" I don't know." Nathan looked down at her arm. He pushed the sleeve up very gently. There were 4 small red marks already darkening on the pale skin above her elbow, one for each of Richard's fingers. Something happened in Nathan's face. It was very small and very brief, and it was gone before Claire could name it, but she saw it and she would remember it later. A kind of cold, a kind of decision. "Daniel," Nathan said, not looking away from her arm. "Yes, sir?" "Richard is not going to see Sunday." "Understood. Not before I've gotten what I need out of him, but not a day after." "Understood, sir." Claire pulled her sleeve back down. "Nathan." "Yes. I heard them. In those walls. I heard Victoria talking to a man she called Gregory. She said Nathan. She said it was her. The accident. 8 months ago, she did it." Nathan's hands went still on her shoulders. For a long moment, he did not speak. "Say that again," he said. "She said what I started 8 months ago. She said she had been patient. She said she was going to finish it. Nathan, it was her. It was your grandmother." Nathan let go of her. He took 1 step back and then another, and he sat down heavily in the chair Daniel had been sitting in. He stared at the floor. His jaw worked. His hands opened and closed on his knees. "I knew," he said quietly. "You knew." I have suspected for months, but suspecting is not the same as knowing, Claire. Suspecting is a thing you can still carry. Knowing is different. Knowing is a weight. I'm sorry. Don't be. He did not look up. You just gave me the one thing I could not give myself. What's that permission? The silence that followed was the heaviest silence Claire had ever stood inside. On the monitor behind them, another feed lit up the wine cellar. And out of a panel in the far wall, Richard emerged cursing under his breath, brushing dust off his jacket. He stood there for a moment with his hands on his hips, looking around the empty cellar, and then he pulled a phone out of his pocket and made a call. Daniel turned up the volume. Not in the room, Richard was saying. No, the passage was a dead end. I don't know how mother, she's 26 years old. She's a waitress. She didn't find the passages on her own. A pause. Yes, I understand that. No, I haven't told Holloway. Holloway is in the car on the way here. If we cancel him now, it will look strange. Another pause. Longer. All right, yes, I'll take care of it. And mother, one more thing, I want the boy moved. Claire's blood went cold. The brother, Richard said, the leukemia boy. If we can't find her, we'll bring her to us. Pull the hospital contract. Suspend the treatment. Within 48 hours, she'll come out of whatever rat hole she's crawled into, and she'll come looking for help. And we'll be waiting. He ended the call. Claire was on her feet before she realized she had moved. Nathan. I heard. Nathan Thomas. He was moved an hour ago. You remember I told you. 3 o'clock this afternoon was the deadline, but Daniel moved him up. He's already out of Northwestern. He's in a private facility under a name that does not appear on any paperwork Richard or Victoria can reach. They can cancel whatever contract they want. My men are paying now. Claire's knees gave. She sat down on the edge of the chair. I already. Nathan stood up. He crossed to her. He knelt in front of her chair, put one hand on the arm of it, and looked her in the eye. Claire, listen to me. I told you this morning that I had been preparing for you for 2 months. I meant that literally. Every move they make today, I have been preparing for. They have had 6 months to grow comfortable. I have had 6 months to grow patient. Today they are going to discover that patience in the right hands is a weapon. What happens now? Now we stop defending. What does that mean? Nathan stood back up. He walked to a small table against the wall, opened a drawer, and took out a manila folder. He set it down in front of her. Open it. She opened it. Photographs, ledgers, bank statements, a handwritten letter in Victoria's unmistakable cursive. This is what I have been collecting for 6 months, Nathan said quietly. Every offshore account, every bribe, every judge on the payroll, every body Victoria has buried, every death certificate Dr. Holloway has signed at her request. It is more than enough to dismantle this family and send my grandmother to a federal prison for the rest of her life. Then why haven't you? Because prison is not what she deserves. Claire looked up at him. What does she deserve? Nathan did not answer for a long moment. She deserves to lose, he said finally. She deserves to sit across the table from the grandson she tried to murder and watch him take everything she built. She deserves to understand in the final hour of her life that she lost to the boy she dismissed. And then, his voice was perfectly steady. She deserves whatever comes after that. Claire swallowed. And the Dr. Holloway, he's on his way here. We let him come. Nathan, he's coming to sedate me. No, he's coming to think what he is about to sedate you. And when he opens his bag at 3 o'clock in front of my grandmother, my uncle, and whatever other witnesses they have arranged, he is going to find that his bag has been very quietly emptied of the syringe he planned to use and refilled with something else. What's something else? Nathan's eyes were very cold. The truth, he said. Claire did not ask him what that meant. Something in his voice told her that it was not a question she wanted answered yet. Daniel looked up from the monitors. Sir, Holloway's car just cleared the front gate. Time at 2:43. He's early. By 17 minutes. Of course he is. Nathan turned back to Claire. All right, here's what happens next. You stay here. You do not leave this room under any circumstance. Daniel stays with you. I am going to walk downstairs, get back in the wheelchair, and put on the face I have been wearing for 8 months, and I am going to sit in that library and let my grandmother think she is 10 minutes away from winning. Nathan. What? How do you do that? Do what? Sit across from her. Let her touch your face. Let her cut your food for 8 months. He was quiet for a long second. I picture the morning of the accident, he said. I picture the sound of the car hitting the divider. I picture the 3 weeks I lost in the coma. I picture the 4 months I spent teaching my legs how to hold me up again. And then I look at her face and I smile. He turned toward the door. It's not difficult. It's the easiest thing in the world. He walked out. The door clicked, shut behind him. Claire sat in the chair with the manila folder open on her lap, and she looked down at a photograph of her grandmother-in-law handing an envelope to a man in a uniform in what looked like a parking garage. And she understood for the first time that her husband of 24 hours was not a man who had been wronged. He was a man who had been waiting for months, for years, maybe his whole life, waiting for a reason, and she had just handed it to him. Daniel shifted in his chair. You all right, Mrs. Calloway? I don't know what I am, Daniel. Fair enough. On the monitor, Nathan had reappeared sitting in the wheelchair again, the blanket across his knees being pushed slowly down the main hallway by a silent man in a black suit. His shoulders were slightly slumped. His head was tilted at a weary angle. He looked once more exactly like a man who would never walk again. Claire had watched him stand. She had heard him run down a hallway, and still watching him now, she almost believed it. How did nobody see through this for 8 months? Because they weren't looking, ma'am. They'd already decided what he was. That's the thing about powerful people. They look, but they stop seeing. Another monitor blinked on. The front door. And stepping through it, carrying a black leather medical bag, was a thin elderly man with gold-rimmed glasses in the kind of mild, harmless face that could only belong to a monster. Dr. Holloway. Margaret met him at the door. She took his coat. Her face on the screen was a perfect mask of polite servitude. Claire watched the old woman smile at the man who had signed her own daughter's death certificate for kid 41 years ago, and she understood that the smile was not a mask at all. It was armor. Margaret had been wearing that armor every day since 1985. Holloway followed a servant down the hallway. He was shown into the library. Victoria was already there. She stood up when he entered, and she crossed the room to greet him with her hands outstretched, and she kissed him on both cheeks like an old friend. Richard stood by the fireplace, hands clasped behind his back, saying nothing, and Nathan was wheeled in a moment later. Claire leaned closer to the monitor. She watched her husband be pushed into position beside his grandmother's chair. She watched Victoria bend down and kiss the top of his head. She watched Nathan turn his face up toward her and offer a small, tired smile. Grandmother. My darling boy, how are you feeling today? Tired. Claire has a headache. I came to sit with you instead. Oh, my love, of course. Victoria stroked his hair. Dr. Holloway was so kind to drive all the way in from Evanston to check on her. Perhaps he could check on you as well while he's here. You've looked so pale these last few days. That would be kind of him. Claire's stomach turned. Listen to them, she whispered. I am, Daniel said. How can he? He's been doing it for 8 months, ma'am. He could do it in his sleep. On the screen, Dr. Holloway set his bag down on the coffee table. He opened it, and Claire saw even through the monitor the tiny moment of confusion that crossed his face as his fingers found something inside the bag that should not have been there. He froze just for a second. Then his doctor's composure returned, and he closed the bag again very casually and cleared his throat. Mrs. Calloway, he said to Victoria, I'd like a word with you privately, if I may, before I see the patient. Of course, Gregory. Come into the hall. They stepped out of the library. Nathan stayed in the wheelchair. He did not move. He did not look at Richard. He did not look at the cameras he knew that were watching him. He simply sat with his hands folded in his lap, the perfect picture of a man who was waiting to be examined. In the hallway, Holloway and Victoria stopped by a window. Another monitor. Another angle. Claire watched them. Holloway opened his bag. He held up what was inside it for Victoria to see. It was not a syringe. It was a photograph. Victoria's face went very still. Zoom in, Claire whispered. Daniel clicked something. The image sharpened. The photograph showed a parking garage Victoria in a dark coat handing a thick envelope to a man in a police uniform. Behind them, visible in the frame, was a parked black sedan with a license plate clearly readable in the flashbulb light. The same sedan Claire realized that had run her father off the road 6 months ago and left him dead in a ditch outside Cicero. On the back of the photograph in Nathan's hard, clean handwriting were two words, I know. Victoria's hand went to her throat. Holloway spoke quickly, too quietly for the camera to pick up. But Claire saw his lips move. She saw him mouth two words over and over, apologetic and pleading. Not me. Not me. And then very slowly, Victoria Calloway lifted her eyes from the photograph and looked down the hallway toward the library, toward her grandson. And for the first time in Claire's short, terrible acquaintance with the woman, Victoria's face showed something that was not warmth and not control and not calculation. It showed fear. Oh, Claire breathed. There it is, Daniel said quietly. In the library, Nathan lifted his head. He looked directly at the camera he knew Claire was watching through, and he smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was not a reassuring smile. It was the smile of a man who had waited 8 months to watch a specific expression appear on a specific face and had just watched it happen. Victoria came back into the library. She walked slowly. She did not look at Richard. She did not look at the servants. She walked straight to her grandson, and she stopped in front of his wheelchair, and for a long moment, nobody in that room spoke. Nathan, my love. Yes, grandmother. May I sit with you? Of course, please. She sat down on the sofa beside the wheelchair. She reached out, and with the same hand that had 8 months ago signed the order to have his brake lines cut, she took his hand in hers. I think, she said softly, we have a great deal to talk about. I think we do. You have been very clever, haven't you, my darling? I have had a good teacher. She laughed, a small, broken laugh, and then for the first time Claire had ever seen her, she closed her eyes. What is it you want, Nathan? I want you to tell me, he said very gently. Who else knew? Knew what, darling? Don't, please don't, not now. His voice for the first time was not calm. It was soft, almost pleading, the voice of a grandson who had loved this woman once. I know what you did. I have known for 3 months. I have sat in this house with you, and I have called you grandmother, and I have let you touch my face, and I have been waiting for you to come to me on your own. You didn't, so I came to you, and I am asking you now as gently as I know how. Who else? Victoria opened her eyes. Only Gregory, she whispered. Only your uncle. Richard. Yes. Not Sebastian. Sebastian is a fool, darling. I would not trust Sebastian with the time of day. Thank you. Nathan's voice was almost tender. Thank you, grandmother. He lifted her hand to his mouth. He kissed the back of it, and then he laid it gently down in her lap, and he reached under the blanket across his knees, and he stood up. He stood up out of the chair. He stood up in full view of his grandmother, his uncle, 3 servants, Dr. Holloway, and every camera in the house. Victoria gasped. Richard by the fireplace went still as stone. Yes, Nathan said quietly. I know. I've been standing for 6 months. I have been walking up and down these hallways while you slept. I have been reading every letter in your study. I have been listening through every wall. I have been preparing, grandmother. And today you helped me finish. Nathan, sit down, grandmother, please. You look unwell. Victoria sat down, very slowly. Her hands were trembling. Richard, Nathan said without turning. Richard did not move. Daniel, Nathan said, bring him. 2 men in dark suits appeared in the doorway of the library. Claire had not seen them on any monitor. They must have been waiting in a room she did not know existed. They walked directly to Richard, and they each took one of his arms, and they began to walk him out of the library. Richard did not resist. His face was the color of chalk. Where, he managed. Where are you taking me? Upstairs, Nathan said calmly. To the room, the one in the east wing. You know the one. You had it prepared this morning for my wife. Richard's legs buckled. The 2 men held him up. Nathan, please. Take him. They took him. The library fell silent again. Only Nathan standing in the middle of the room and Victoria small and gray and suddenly very old sitting on the sofa with her hands in her lap. Nathan? Yes, grandmother. What happens to me? He looked at her for a long, long time, and then he did something Claire did not expect. He sat down on the sofa beside her. He took her hand again. He laid it in his own, and he spoke to her the way a grandson speaks to a woman who had once a long time ago baked him cookies and braided his sister's hair and sung lullabies in a language he no longer remembered. You raised me, grandmother. Yes. You taught me everything I know about this family. Yes. And you are the most dangerous human being I have ever met in my life. Yes. So what happens to you, grandmother, is going to depend entirely on you, and on whether tonight you are willing to sign a great many pieces of paper. Do you understand, Assam? Her eyes were wet. Yes, my love. Good. He stood up. He walked to the door of the library. He paused there for a moment, one hand on the frame. He did not look back. Daniel. Sir. Bring my wife down. I think it's time she met my grandmother properly. In the command room, Claire slowly closed the manila folder on her lap. She stood up. Her legs were shaking. Daniel rose with her. He picked up the handgun, slid it into the holster beneath his jacket, and gestured to the door. After you, Mrs. Calloway. She walked to the door. She put her hand on the bolt. And she knew with a clarity she had not felt in all her 26 years that the girl who had signed a contract in this house yesterday afternoon was not the woman who was about to walk down these stairs. That girl was already gone. She drew in a breath. She turned the bolt, and she stepped out of the room. Claire walked down the marble staircase with her hand on Daniel's arm because her legs would not quite trust themselves. She could hear the house now, really hear it, doors opening somewhere below, voices, footsteps moving fast through hallways that an hour ago had been silent. The mansion that had felt like a tomb when she woke up this morning had become a beehive, and the queen of the hive was sitting in the library with her hands in her lap and her life in her grandson's grip. Mrs. Calloway. Yes, Daniel. Whatever you see in that room, you don't have to react to it. You can just stand. You can just breathe. You don't owe that woman a single word. I know. Just wanted to make sure you knew. They reached the bottom of the stairs. Margaret was standing at the foot. The old woman had a dish rag in her hands, of all things still playing, the housekeeper still wearing the armor. But her eyes when she looked at Claire were not a servant's eyes at all. They were wet, and they were proud. You made it, Margaret whispered. Because of you. No, child, because of you. Claire almost broke then. She almost fell into the old woman's arms and cried the way a daughter cries when she comes home safe from a war. But Daniel touched her elbow, and she remembered where she was, and she straightened her back, and she nodded at Margaret once, and Margaret nodded back, and that was all either of them would ever need to say. She walked to the library door. She stopped. Her hand hovered over the handle, and for one strange, suspended second, she thought of Thomas, her brother, 12 years old, in a hospital bed in a building whose name she did not know, under a name that was not his, being watched over by men she had never met. She thought of him sleeping, of his chest rising and falling under the thin blue blanket. Alive. Alive because of her. Alive because a stranger in a wheelchair had shaken her hand yesterday afternoon and said welcome to the family like it was a threat and a promise at the same time. She pushed the door open. Victoria was still on the sofa. She had not moved. Her hands were still folded. Her spine was still straight, but her face was wrong. It had been rearranged in the 20 minutes since Claire had last seen it on the monitor. The warmth was gone. The performance was gone. What was left was a woman in her late 70s with white hair and tired eyes, and for the first time she looked exactly her age. Nathan was standing by the fireplace. He looked up when Claire walked in, and something happened in his face that Claire was not prepared for. Not relief, not satisfaction. Something softer than either, and something more dangerous. She filed it away to think about later. She could not think about it now. Come in, Mrs. Calloway, Nathan said. She walked in. Victoria lifted her eyes. Oh, my dear, the old woman said faintly. My dear, you are alive. Yes, ma'am. I am so glad. Claire looked at her for a long, long moment. No, ma'am, she said quietly. You are not. The room went still. Victoria blinked. Claire, you tried to have me taken away this afternoon. I heard you. I was in the wall behind your sitting room when you told a man named Gregory what the room upstate would do. You said it like you were ordering drapes. You said it like it was nothing. And you said it because you thought I had nobody, no family, no money, no one to ask where I went. Claire's voice was steady. It surprised her. You forgot one thing, ma'am. What did I forget? You forgot that I married your grandson. Victoria did not answer. Nathan did not move. Daniel stayed at the door, and Claire Bennett, who 24 hours ago had been nobody at all, walked across the library and sat down in the chair directly across from Victoria Calloway, and she folded her hands in her lap the way Victoria had taught her to, and she waited. He loves you, Victoria said finally. It was almost a question. No, ma'am, he doesn't, not yet, maybe not ever. That's not why I'm here. Then why are you here? Because my brother is 12 years old and he is alive because of a man in a wheelchair who did not have to help him. And because you are going to sign whatever he puts in front of you tonight, and if you don't, I am going to sit in that chair for the rest of my life and watch you sign it in the morning. Victoria looked at her for a very long time, and then slowly the old woman smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was not a calculating smile. It was something Claire had not seen on that face before at all. It was recognition. The kind of recognition a master gives to an apprentice who has just without warning surpassed her. Nathan, Victoria said quietly without taking her eyes off Claire. Where on earth did you find this girl? I didn't find her grandmother. I bought her. And how much did she cost? $400,000 in her brother's life. A bargain. I thought so. Victoria laughed. It was short and it was dry, and there was something in it that was almost like relief. All right, the old woman said. All right, bring the papers. Nathan crossed to the desk. He opened a drawer. He took out a leather folder Claire had not seen before, thick with documents tabbed in a dozen places with small colored flags. He set it down on the coffee table between his grandmother and his wife. He did not sit. He placed a pen beside the folder. He stepped back. Victoria looked down at the folder. May I read them first? You may read every word, even knowing what I'll find inside, even then. She opened the folder. Claire watched the old woman's face as she read, page by page, line by line, every transfer of authority, every account that was no longer hers, every company, every holding, every piece of the empire that had been built and bought and buried by 4 generations of Callaway hands. By the 3rd page, Victoria's hands were trembling. By the 6th, she had stopped reading and was simply signing. By the 10th, her face was wet. She did not make a sound. When she reached the last page, she lifted the pen. She paused. Nathan. Yes, grandmother. My son, your father. When he died. Yes. It was not an accident, was it? Nathan was very still. I don't know, grandmother. I was 10 years old. It was not. No. Your Uncle Richard. Yes. I knew, Victoria whispered. I always knew, and I did nothing. Do you understand me, Nathan? I did nothing, because I thought Richard would be easier to control than grief. And I told myself for 22 years that I had made the right choice. And I built this family on top of that choice. And I raised you to step into a seat that I had covered in my own son's blood. Nathan's jaw worked. Sign the paper, grandmother. Nathan, sign it. She signed it. She closed the folder. She set the pen down. And for a long moment, the only sound in the library was the fire. Thank you, Nathan said quietly. Where will I go? You'll go to the house in Lake Geneva. You will stay there. You will not leave. You will have a nurse and a cook and 2 men I trust. And you will not come back to this city ever again for any reason. You will see no one. You will call no one. You will not buy in time of whatever old age brings you. And in the meantime, if you behave, you will be permitted one luxury. What luxury? I will visit you once a year on your birthday. Victoria began to cry. She did not sob. She did not wail. She simply sat on the sofa with tears sliding down her papery cheeks, and she nodded once and she said, Thank you, my darling boy. And she closed her eyes. Nathan turned to Daniel. Take her upstairs. Have Margaret pack her things. She leaves tonight. Yes, sir. Daniel crossed the room, offered Victoria his arm with a strange formal courtesy, and helped the old woman to her feet. She did not look at Claire as she passed. She did not look at anyone, Schwab. She walked out of the library, leaning on Daniel like a woman walking out of her own funeral, and the door closed behind them. And then there was only Nathan and Claire. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Nathan walked to the fireplace. He put one hand on the mantel. He stared down into the embers. His shoulders rose and fell once slowly like a man who had been holding his breath for 8 months and was only now remembering how to let it out. Richard, Claire said softly, upstairs. And he gave us the names of the other 2 men involved in my father's death. He gave us the bank that moved the money. He gave us the location of 3 of my grandmother's shell companies that she forgot to list in her own records. And after that, Nathan did not answer. Claire did not press. She understood now that there were questions you did not ask in this family. That was not a betrayal of herself. It was a survival she had earned. Thomas, she said. He's fine. He's resting. The treatment resumed at 2 o'clock. I have photographs on my phone if you want to see. Please. He pulled out his phone. He crossed to her. He sat down in the chair beside hers and he handed her the phone. On the screen was her brother. He was in a hospital bed. The room behind him was small and bright, not the sterile gray of Northwestern. A window, a potted plant, a nurse in blue scrubs checking an IV. Thomas's eyes were closed. His face was peaceful. He had a stuffed bear tucked under his arm that Claire had never seen before. Who gave him the bear? I did, this morning, before I came back to the house. You went to see him. I wanted to know what I was fighting for Claire. I wanted to look at his face before today began, so I could remember it if things went wrong. Claire's hand came up and pressed against her mouth. She did not cry. She had not cried all day. She did not cry now. But her eyes filled, and one tear went down her cheek. And Nathan did not say anything, and he did not reach for her, and he did not try to make it smaller than it was. He simply sat beside her, and he let her look at the photograph of her little brother sleeping, and he let her feel whatever she needed to feel. After a long moment, she gave him back the phone. Nathan. Yes. What happens now? Now we eat something. I'm told you haven't eaten since yesterday. Margaret is going to be very upset. I know what you mean. She waited. Nathan leaned forward. He rested his elbows on his knees. He looked down at his hands. Now, he said quietly, I spend the next year dismantling the parts of this family that should never have existed. I spend the year after that building something in their place. I make good on a promise I made my grandfather when I was 14, in which she never let me keep. I take this family into the daylight. I make the name mean something different than it has meant for 40 years. And me, he looked up. That is the part I have not earned the right to answer yet, Mrs. Calloway. Why not? Because yesterday I walked into a room and I told a frightened young woman that her brother would die unless she signed her life away to a stranger. And she signed. And then I brought her into a house where my grandmother tried to kill her within 24 hours. And I sat across from her this morning and I told her not to fall in love with me as if that were something I had any right to ask. He paused. The contract between us is enforceable for 2 years. I will not hold you to a single day of it. If you want to leave this house tomorrow morning, you will leave. Your brother will be cared for regardless. You will never again be asked by me or by anyone who carries my name to stand in a room and be frightened for your life. Claire was quiet. Nathan. Yes. Is that what you think I want? I don't know what you want, Claire. Neither do I yet. She looked at her hands. I think I want to see my brother tomorrow. I think I want to sit next to his bed and hold his hand and not say anything for about 2 hours. I think I want a meal that I did not have to inspect for poison. I think I want to sleep in a room where the walls don't listen for just one night. And then I think I want to come back here. Claire, let me finish. He closed his mouth. I did not walk into this house the same woman who is walking out of this room tonight. I know that. You know that. And I don't know yet what I have become, but I know it is not a woman who quits. You told me this morning not to fall in love with you. Fine, I won't. She met his eyes. But you made a promise to me, Nathan. Through a contract. You promised to keep my brother alive. You promised to keep me alive. You kept both of those promises today. And I'll be honest with you, I did not expect you to. I expected at some point this afternoon to die in a room I had never seen before. I did not die. You did not let me die. So whatever this marriage is and whatever it becomes, I am not walking away from it tomorrow morning. I am going to see my brother. And then I am going to come home. And then you and I are going to sit down at a table and we are going to decide what kind of Callaways we want to be. Nathan stared at her for a long time. And then very quietly he said, all right, all right, all right. That's all you're going to say. That's all I have earned the right to say, Claire. She laughed. It was a small, startled sound, and it came out of her before she could stop it, and it was the first time she had laughed in 2 days. Nathan almost smiled. Almost. A knock came at the door. Come in, Nathan said. Margaret opened it. She had a tray in her hands, soup, bread, 2 bowls, 2 spoons, 2 glasses of water. She carried it across the room and set it down on the coffee table, and she straightened up and she looked at Claire, and her old face did something it had not done in 4 decades inside this house. She smiled, a real smile, a whole one. "Mrs. Calloway," Margaret said, "eat." "Yes, ma'am." "You too, sir." "Yes, Margaret. Both of you right now, no more talking until the bowls are empty. Am I understood?" Nathan laughed, just once, a short, rough sound that seemed to surprise him as much as it surprised Claire. And then he picked up a spoon and he ate, and Claire picked up a spoon and she ate, and Margaret stood by the door with her hands folded in front of her apron and watched them both the way a mother watches her children come home. And that, Claire thought, was the moment the house finally changed. Not the moment Victoria signed the papers. Not the moment Richard was taken upstairs. Not the moment Claire walked down the staircase on Daniel's arm. It was the moment an old housekeeper who had lost her own daughter inside these walls 41 years ago stood in the library and watched 2 frightened people eat soup together and knew for the first time in her life that somebody had finally won. They finished the soup. Margaret took the tray. She left. Nathan stood up. He walked to the window. He looked out at the drive, at the iron gate, at the lights of Chicago far below. "Claire." "Yes. Thank you." "For what?" "For not dying today." She did not know what to say to that. She stood up too. She walked to him. She stopped at his shoulder and she looked out at the city with him, and for a long time they did not speak. Then he said very softly, "Tomorrow I'll take you to your brother." "Thank you. And the day after that we come home and we begin." "Begin what?" He looked at her. And for the first time since she had met him, Nathan Calloway's face was not guarded, not calculating, not tired, just a man. A young man who had been hiding in a wheelchair for 8 months and who had that afternoon finally stood up in the sunlight and stayed standing. "Whatever we decide," he said, and that for now was enough. Outside, the rain had stopped. Somewhere in the East Wing, Margaret was folding Victoria's clothes into a trunk and humming very quietly a lullaby in a language she had not sung in 41 years. Somewhere upstairs, a room that had been prepared to destroy Claire was being quietly dismantled by 2 silent men. Somewhere in a private hospital on the north side of the city, a 12-year-old boy was sleeping with a stuffed bear under his arm and an IV in his hand and a future ahead of him that he did not yet know he had been given. And somewhere in the library of a mansion on the Gold Coast, a woman who had walked into this house yesterday as a waitress with nothing, and a man who had been waiting 8 months to walk out of his own prison, stood shoulder to shoulder at a window and watched the city they were about to change. Claire Bennett had married a paralyzed mafia boss to save her brother's life. She had discovered that he was not paralyzed at all. She had discovered that his grandmother had tried to murder him and then tried to murder her. She had discovered that the gentlest old woman in the house was the bravest. She had discovered that her uncle-in-law had murdered her husband's father. She had discovered in the space of a single day that she was not the woman she had thought she was. She was stronger. She was smarter. She was harder. She was against every odd that had ever been stacked against her alive. And she was, for the rest of this long, hard life, she had just been handed a Calloway. Not by accident, by choice. The fire burned low in the library. The clock on the mantel struck midnight. And Claire Calloway squared her shoulders, turned away from the window, and walked into her new life without once looking back. She had not broken. She had not cracked. She had not been buried in the basement of that house. She had done exactly what she had promised herself in the dark of her first night she would do. She had walked out alive, and she had walked out a queen.